Hi everybody, welcome back to the NYSE, theCUBE and NYSE Wired's coverage of AI factories, data centers of the future. Diane Bryant is here, CUBE alum. It's great to see you again, Diane.
Thank
After
you.
our session out in our Palo Alto office.
Yeah, this is pretty posh out here at NYSE. I'm impressed.
Yeah, it's kind of bougie,
impressed.
so you love it. It's just the best is yet to come.
Oh.
So thank you for coming into the studio.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate you being here. So a lot of action since we last talked. Your Lip Bhutan, your boy, has been making moves. Right? We saw a big announcement last week with NVIDIA making an investment in Intel. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm super proud of Lip-Bu, obviously. I mean, the big difference is he's a businessman, right? And you need a technologist to run a tech company like Intel. It's very complicated, but it needs someone that actually knows how to run a business. And you can see how quickly, I mean, he's a great businessman. Look at what he's done at Cadence, look what he did in his VC world. He knows semiconductors, but he also knows how to run and make deals and make things happen. And that's what the company needed. So he obviously had time to think through, given he was on the board and through that process. So he understood Intel, so he could hit the ground running and poof, off to Washington, 8.9 billion, then off to Jensen, another 5 billion. He's got to get he's turning the company around. There's huge debt and he's got to turn it around.
Well, the turnaround he did with the president was amazing. I mean, one day the president's saying he should leave, the next, a month later he's walking away with 14 billion in cash, which like you say, they need. So I think that underscores his ability to interact with people. I mean, you know him, I don't know him.
Very business savvy, logical thinker, very charismatic, very honest and high integrity. Like who wouldn't want to do business with him? Who wouldn't want to give him a few billion?
So I may have overstated sort of the impact of that deal more than, I felt like it was more than just money, but you were explaining to me off camera, look, we've always put the CPU and the GPU together. So you don't see that as necessarily a big change. At the same time, the foundry maybe gets a little boost, building the SoC. I feel like AMD maybe gets boxed out a little bit with the holy water that Jensen just threw on Intel. Any thoughts on that?
Well, so you're right, you can separate it and look at two parts. One is on the product line part, the x86 processor. The AMD is there, Intel is there. That's been true for, since the 80s when I, was driving up the data center business. So you want choice, and so you have two x86 microprocessors. I mean, Andy Grove was one that said, hey, we can't have a monopoly, we need someone else in the industry, and he licensed the x86 architecture to AMD. I mean, that's how it was an intentional. So you have those two in the market. The server has a GPU to boot off, or a CPU for boot, and then you have the GPU to offload your matrix multiplication, your AI, or high-performance computing workloads. So you need the CPU. And Jensen and everyone else in the industry wants Intel to survive. Nobody wants to see Intel go away. And Lip-Bu, is sitting with a company that has incredible debt. So Jensen putting in money to keep an industry icon up and running is great. Then you look at the foundry side of it. When I was at Intel, we tried to start a foundry business literally 5 times, and we're never successful. So now this is times 6, right? The 6th time to make it happen. And every time we created a foundry business, of course we went to NVIDIA and asked them if we could build their product in our foundry. You have to have a robust, solid foundry to get someone like NVIDIA's business or anyone else. Again, the world would like an alternative to TSMC. TSMC is running 60% of all silicon in the world goes through TSMC. Okay, so someone needs to grab the other 40%. So Intel has the opportunity to grab the other 40%. So everybody would like a second source in every area. And so now Intel needs to go off and build a foundry. And again, if Intel fails, that opportunity is gone. And that's the pitch to the U.S. government too. We can't build an Intel foundry without the capital to build it. And it's a national security issue. It's a national icon.
Yeah, you'd like that foundry to be U.S. headquartered, U.S.
Absolutely.
domiciled for sure. Okay, so we've seen a boom in data center spending, but that's kind of been a one-trick pony, Diane. I mean, it's hyperscalers and neoclouds spending on GPUs and networking. How do you see the enterprise adoption evolving?
So there's a lot in there. So number one, you're right. I mean, there's going to be $500 billion in infrastructure build out this year. I mean, it's a crazy amount of money, and that's projected to be $1 trillion in 2030. So there's massive build out of the infrastructure, which is all obviously step one. Then step two, you've got all of these generative AI companies that scale is the game, right? If you don't have scale, you don't have a generative AI solution. You need very large language models. So they need all that infrastructure to run. If you look at it today, if you look at who is using generative AI, who's using Claude and Gemini and all these folks, ChatGPT, 80% is consumer, and they're not paying. 20% is enterprise, okay? And so 80% of that revenue is coming from enterprise, 80% of their revenue. So you've got to grow that. You've got to get more and more enterprise adopting AI solutions. That is generally a hurdle to get enterprise to do anything. I was CIO of Intel for 4 years. Enterprise IT moves very, very slowly, and it also, adoption of Gen AI or any other AI solution is a behavioral change. It's a workflow change. You got to get people to change. So that's going to be a hard slog. The first way that enterprise is going to get the advantage of AI is through the SaaS providers. So SAP, now they've integrated AI into their SAP solution. I'm a CIO, I get SAP through the cloud, poof, I now have new solutions coming.
Salesforce, Workday.
Salesforce, and they've announced a lot of that.
Yep.
Yeah, they have new capabilities, new features that you, CIO, can buy. So that's the first way that enterprise is going to get access. The second is through all these startups. I mean, look at how many VC funding, over half of it is going into AI, and 90% of that is SaaS, software. So CIOs, enterprise will now have the ability to leverage some of these new applications that are coming and give them a benefit. And then the very last way they're going to take benefit is to build their own AI solutions on-prem, build their own data sets, build their own capability. That's the long, hard slog.
Do the startups need a better route to market for on-prem? Because they've just been going to the cloud for the last 10 or 15 years because they didn't have to spend on the CapEx. What is their route to market?
Oh no, it's definitely SaaS solutions. All those will be delivered as SaaS solutions. There's so much low-hanging fruit to improve efficiency in enterprise through AI. And that's why you see just massive number of startups, right? There's just so many opportunities. The one I love is a friend of mine is general counsel at a company, and they've adopted a startup called Bright Flag. It's an AI software solution that when you get legal invoices coming in, it will analyze the legal invoice and tell you if you're being overcharged. It'll say, this contract should have been read in 1 hour, not 4. This should have taken 1 lawyer to evaluate instead of 3. And it'll tell you all the places that you have been overcharged. And she said they've never got an invoice where they weren't overcharged, and the legal firm never disputed the overcharges. Always reduced the cost and sent it back. We need Bright Flag. So that's just one silly example, but you could look at that anywhere in your enterprise and see that. I mean, it's quite fun. It's quite fascinating.
To your point about opportunities in the enterprise, today it seems like the model is build it and they will come. OpenAI, really, they've got a consumer business model. They're losing tons of money.
Yeah.
The scaling laws, people catch up in months. There's just seems to be no competitive advantage that's sustainable. But the enterprise can be different because there's proprietary data in the enterprise that can be applied. It just seems to take longer. As a former CIO, you know that.
That's true, because enterprises have massive amounts of data. So with time, and I do mean time, like I'm talking 8-10 years, because it's talent also. They'll start using their own data sets, maybe integrated with publicly available data sets, and improve their efficiency in operations. But that'll take a lot of time. Meanwhile, all of these generative AI solutions are going to go through a consolidation factor. I mean, all this infrastructure that's getting built out, it's all speculative, right? And there's multi-year commitments that may or may not ever come true because it is speculative. Not all of these folks are going to succeed. So maybe we'll end up with Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google's solution, and of course Microsoft. Maybe that'll be it, but it'll consolidate way down. So now you've got all this infrastructure that everyone's trying to build out. Who's paying for it? First of all, those guys don't have the CapEx to pay for it. So you got to get one of the hyperscalers to trust that you're going to grow into that capacity, and we're going to have exactly what happened in 1990s with telco, right? Internet came along. All those telco companies were building out fiber to support the internet. Look how many of them went bankrupt, defunct. Frontier, WorldCom, Lucent,
Enron.
So we're going to have. I'll end that though, but today would you say we have too much internet capacity? And there's still 3 billion
to your
people.
point, right, it worked.
Supply, demand. Demand will come, right? But I do think we've got this flurry of building out data centers that exceed demand today. And then over time, just like with the telcos, over time, you're going to consume all that capacity.
So don't you think a big difference is that was funded with debt, today it's funded with cash flow with the hyperscalers, but at the same time, the hyperscalers could wake up one day and say, you know what, like the Oracle deal, they got a $450 billion backlog, much of that is OpenAI, and if OpenAI says, you know what, we're going to dial it down, that's going to have a ripple effect.
Well, exactly. No, that is my point. Yes, those people are flush with cash. Yes, they can build that capacity out. It's a risk decision, though. Do they believe that the demand for that will come, or will it be like the 90s when the dot-com burst and all of a sudden you didn't need all that fiber and all of those people went defunct? So it's speculative. You're making a bet. You're making, as one of the hyperscalers, you're making a bet, whether it's Oracle or AWS, that demand really will come, even though today those folks are not making money. All their consumption is consumers that are getting it for free. So you're placing a bet.
So one school of thought says maybe it doesn't blow up like the dot-com because these companies are so flush with cash. On the other side, if they dial it down, it's almost like the VCs funding Yahoo portal ads. And you remember Silicon Valley between 2001 and the Google IPO, it was like a ghost town. And so, if we knew the answer to that, we'd
Well,
be
it'll be fun. We'll definitely watch. The build out is fun, fascinating. I mean, nothing more exciting. All of the hyperscalers building their own XPUs, right? You see one by one. Obviously, Google started with a GPU. AWS has Trainium. Microsoft is deploying theirs. So all of that is happening. All that goes to Broadcom, on the board of Broadcom. All that benefits Broadcom, of course. But then you got to ask yourself, what happens to NVIDIA's volume? If almost 50% of all compute in the world is within the hyperscalers, and the hyperscalers move off of NVIDIA onto their own XPU, what happens to NVIDIA? So that's, I think, if I had a crystal ball, they've got to build their own cloud. They've got to maintain that stickiness they have with CUDA. And
thinking about when you were at Intel, it was that sort of virtual integration between Intel and Microsoft. In some ways, NVIDIA is Wintel because of CUDA.
Yeah.
So to the extent that CUDA becomes the programming model, they have an advantage there. There are alternatives. I mean, AMD's trying to create an alternative. There are open source alternatives. They haven't really, it takes a long time, as you know, to build that type of software and make it robust.
No, that is NVIDIA's, stickiness or lock is CUDA. But if you're one of the hyperscalers, and the hyperscalers have 50% of the market, and you've decided I'm going to stop buying tens of thousands of dollars per GPU, and I'm going to move to my own, I'm going to pick up my software stack and I'm going to port it. I'm not beholden to CUDA. Now, you're correct. If you're enterprise, if you still have a mainframe, you're pretty committed to IBM, you're not moving off. If you have CUDA in your enterprise, yeah, you're probably stuck. You're going to keep running on NVIDIA. You're not going to waste your time porting your app onto AWS or somewhere else, right? But that's not the majority of the market.
And that's why you see these neoclouds emerging, like CoreWeave and Lambda and others, right? And NVIDIA, of course, funding CoreWeave, even taking some of their excess capacity if they need to.
Well, that is smart, right? I think the other part of the build out is not just the data center for the models, it's also the inference, right? All the compute that's going on at the edge. If you look at any of those hyperscalers, they are not just building their own data centers, they're leveraging all those colos, right? You don't want to, Microsoft, I think it's 20% is their own physical data center, 80% is leasing space out of all those colos. Right. Like, why build all that silly, data center infrastructure? So you're absolutely right. If for those folks, the neos, they built a data center, not just a colo, but they've actually loaded the infrastructure into it, and they've loaded CUDA. Well, now NVIDIA doesn't have to go build that themselves. It's a great partnership. It's streamlines the operations for NVIDIA.
I want to ask you about AI productivity. I know that's a passion of yours, and you touched on it before. I was listening to Michael Dell. He was on the BG2 podcast, Bill Gurley and Brad Gerstner, and he said, because there's a narrative that, wow, we're way overspending on AI and there's no ROI, there's no return. And Michael Dell said, well, the global GDP is like 120 billion, let's call it. And people talk about 10% improvement in productivity as a result of AI. So that's 12 trillion. So, sorry, I said 120. It's 120 trillion dollar GDP. And so 12 trillion would be 10%. People are talking 10%, 20%, even 30%. So his point was, look, we're probably spending 70 or 80 billion dollars on CapEx for AI. We may be underspending. Now, to your point about the internet before,
It's
all
absorption. It's
right.
how
It's
quick
the
they can
timing is
absorb it.
everything. So,
Yeah.
but
It'll happen, right? Eventually, all that capacity will be absorbed, but there is a consumption delay.
so there'll be some pain in between.
A little bit in between. But on your productivity comment, no. So it's we talk about AI and the fact you hear a lot of naysayers saying that now AI will come in and it'll eliminate jobs, right? And that's kind of the premise of the negative premise of AI and the fear factor, the fear mongering. If to Michael's point, if you look at AI as an efficiency play, which I think we all would,
Sure.
right? You can take the low-level workloads or low-level work that you do and offload it to AI. It's clear. If it's an efficiency play, you think about Jevons paradox. What does Jevons paradox do? Anytime there's efficiency, there's greater demand for that, whatever that capacity is that just received the efficiency. So when you make an engineer more productive, right? Because you give him Gen AI, he can now do more. And that more is your top line. That's your revenue. So you've released a limiter to driving your revenue, driving the top line. So you're not going to let that engineer go. You're now going to benefit from the fact that that engineer can do more and I can accelerate my company. So it's beautiful. It's Jevons paradox. It's beautiful. And to Michael's point, that it's going to unleash a lot of companies that now can be more efficient, deliver more in the same amount of time. The negative side of it is, yes, if you're in a function, a line function, or a staff function, if you're HR, if you're legal, it is true that your job could be replaced, or that organization will come down. So in that way, enterprise is going to get a benefit on the OpEx side, right? If you're a support function, a line function, you should worry. But if you're a function that is literally the core of the company, even marketing, if you're in an enterprise marketing, you could reduce the headcount of marketing. But if you're a marketing company, now you've been able to take on more clients for the same amount of capacity. So it's very different. It has the opportunity to drive the top line, not just the bottom line.
Machines have always replaced humans,
yeah.
right? First time.
Yeah, do you remember the 90s? I remember we had a man that walked around with a basket and delivered mail. Guess what? That man's gone. We got PCs, we got email. That man lost his job.
People used to hang billboards, right? Okay. But the first time ever it's cognitive function, so that's a little different. But
some people will lose their jobs. So we'll see as a GDP, as a market, there will be acceleration because you've made your employees more efficient.
And more opportunity for all.
More opportunity.
You mentioned before, and I agree with you, it's going to take the better part of a decade for this to play out, especially in the enterprise. You hear people talking about this is the year of agentic. It's not so easy. As a former CIO, it's not so easy to get your data house in order, apply it, and then in the context of AI, take advantage of it to get competitive, of differentiation.
Right.
Why is it so hard for the CIO to move at the speed of, say, NVIDIA or OpenAI?
Well, kind of exactly what I was just pointing to, which is if you're SAP deploying new AI features into that application, into that ERP, you're going to drive your revenue, right? It is your mainstream path to revenue acceleration. So you are going to do that fast and hard. Then if you're the CIO and you are looking around saying, well, how do I drive revenue for the company? I'm one of those staff positions that's going to get reduced. You're not in the core space. It's just harder. You don't have the whole company looking at you like if you were the business unit that's driving the product saying, increase revenue, drive. You're the guy sitting back in IT going, I could lose my job. I don't know.
Yeah, right. So it's a risk management. It's
a priority for the company, right? You're looking at an IT organization that's a staff function. They don't have the expertise. They don't have the talent. You've got, every organization in the company yelling at you. Finance says they want this. HR says they need this. The engineers say they want this. It's a lot, and so it's a very slow slog to get IT to prioritize, make a selection, bring in the talent, bring in the capabilities, clean the data. It's a big effort. It's prioritization.
So that is
that can drive top line.
That is the role of the CIO is prioritization, the business case, aligning with the business.
Figuring out if it could actually change the revenue trajectory of the company, or else why? It's just a burn.
and I guess understanding the degree of difficulty, because there are probably some quick wins that you can get, but at the same time, if those quick wins don't add up to transformation.
No, but your quick wins come from SaaS. Your quick wins come from Workday integrating AI, from SAP integrating, from Salesforce integrating. Those are quick wins. All of a sudden, poof, right? I'm subscribing to SAP and poof, now I have the capability to use a new feature. That's where the adoption comes, and those are the big winners. Then you have all the startups, you know, if I want to take a little more risk and grab a bright flag and fix my legal side. And then the long slog is enterprise, your own enterprise apps, your own enterprise data. But you know, it's inevitable with all that capital being spent. You know, it's inevitable that AI will penetrate enterprise. It'll just take a little bit.
I want to ask you about vertical integration. The history, think of the history of tech. IBM was obviously highly integrated, vertically integrated. You had the peripherals around it. And then in your world, Intel, Microsoft, Oracle, Seagate, I mean, the industry became highly fragmented. Right. And then individual competition occurred on those lines. Although you had a virtual integration with Microsoft, and you were vertically integrated with Foundry. And hyperscalers are pretty vertically integrated for the most part, even though they buy one of everything from everybody. They're building their own silicon. NVIDIA, in a way, is pretty highly vertically integrated, although they don't own Foundry. AMD finally got rid of, you know, Jerry Sanders, only real men have foundries. Well, okay, and that worked with TSM. What are your thoughts on vertical integration, when it makes sense, when it doesn't make sense?
Well, I think so you're spot on, right? In the old days, the Intel mantra was you build an open platform. You invite everybody to build on top of your platform. So we have the processor, we invite Microsoft to put the OS on, we invite Seagate to put the hard drive on, we invite Micron to put the memory on, right? It was an open platform, and from that openness, you got HP, Dell, IBM, right? They were all able to build x86 service. There was no lock. You're absolutely right, though. The world has changed, right? That model is gone, and now the hyperscalers is becoming a very integrated stack with them building their own GPUs, right? It is control, control, control. NVIDIA is the same, right? They had a GPU, they have the software platform CUDA, they're building their own systems now. You know, next step is the cloud, right? It's, from an industry perspective, it is completely flipped. It's no longer, you know, kumbaya, let's build an open platform for the world to innovate on. It is, let me build my stack. And how do you do that? Scale. That comes through consolidation. That's why we have, you know, the top 10, the Magnificent 8 now, with Broadcom being number 8. The Magnificent 8, the largest market cap companies in the world, they have built their proprietary stack. Apple, you can throw Apple in there too. So that is the way of the world today. There's no more play nice.
Is Dell an exception that proves the rule? In other words, you can actually take a relatively low margin business, and if you have enough scale, you can actually thrive with that sort of open model. You know, purchasing GPUs from NVIDIA or CPUs from Intel and AMD, software from whomever, bringing it through your distribution
I think you have to
channel.
look at who's in control.
I think that's the key.
So when I was running the data center business, Amazon, Andy Jassy, I love him, so I hope he's, Andy would graciously call me and say, this is the processor I want, build it, sell it to me, and if you do, this is the server builder I want, say Dell, give it to him. Dell, you put that in there and you give it back to me. It's pure control. Right. And the industry, we were all puppets to that hyperscaler. Whatever they said to do, that's what we did into their lock system. And of course, they want proprietary. That's, you know, when Andy would say, Diane, I want a special CPU, nobody else can have it. It's like, you got your special scale. You got it there. They've got the scale. And so you're right. Dell's done very well. I did very well because I partnered with AWS. I gave them a cloud. I partnered with Google. I partnered with Microsoft. You know, those, you can't afford to lose those big five, right?
Right, right.
So of course you do what you have to do in order to win them. Dell's been very good at winning the business of these hyperscalers, and hence he's doing very well.
So let's close on how you see the enterprise AI and the adoption playing out. It's early days. I think you said 20% today, and those are probably the big banks.
20% of generative AI capacity use, downloads, use today. 20% is enterprise, 80% is consumer. And so to get enterprise now to adopt it is change management, which is such a boring term. I hate it. But how do you get people to change? You've been doing the job the way you do it for 10 years, and I'm telling you, no, use this generative AI tool. I mean,
that's not how I do it.
It's not how I do it. And so you always, when trying to drive change inside of a company, you always have to get the tipping point employees, those employees that are eager to jump in and try out generative AI and do their job differently. If you can get the tipping point to do it because they believe in it, they believe there's upside to the company, they believe they can be successful, they're not going to get fired because they're using Gen AI because now they're not needed, their job isn't needed. They believe in it. You get those folks and either the rest follow or they leave, right? It's self-selection at that point. So it will happen. I mean, there's huge value. Like I said, the efficiency, especially if you're in the business unit line and you're the one that can unleash more revenue, top line growth for your company, it is all upside for you. You shouldn't be afraid of generative AI.
Lean into enterprise AI. Diane Bryant, thank you so much for coming into our studio. I'd love to have you back in future episodes, so thank you.
Lots of fun. Great talking to you.
Okay, thank you for watching. This is Dave Vellante, John Furrier as well for Data Center of the Future, AI Factories, theCUBE, plus NYSE Wired from the New York Stock Exchange. We'll be right back right after this short break.